Hi, I'm Tinny from Medieval Design, and I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, today being Christmas Day. And also, while I'm on the video, I'd like to thank everybody for all the orders and all the patronage and all the positive vibes. Much appreciated. It makes my day go a lot better when I get some positive comments from people. Now, if you've received a Medieval Design stove as a Christmas present, I'd like to take the next few minutes to, especially if you're a new user, to run over some safety tips on this and some user tips. So if the directions don't quite cover everything and you don't understand, you'll be able to operate the stove with no problem. I'm not going to do it for the stoves that are very simple, but I will do it with one of the wick stoves because there's a few things that I feel should be pointed out. So let's move the camera in and take a look at what I'm talking about, and just enjoy the next few minutes. If you have a remote feed stove from me, there's a couple of things I'd like to point out. Now, this nipple cap is on a heat bottle. You probably don't have one of these because I don't sell them anymore. But nipple caps are nipple caps, and the one point that I want to point out is the first time you put it on your bottle, be careful to get it on. Make sure you don't get it on cross-threaded, and that when you look at it, it's nice and level. Now, when you go to fuel your stove the first time, don't fuel your stove with the bottle way up here, because if you haven't got your nipple cap on correctly and the alcohol leaks out, it will run right down the fuel line and run to the stove, and when you light the stove, you will have a mess, and we don't want to do that. So I recommend that when you first put the cap on, that you cup your hand underneath it, and when you go to fuel the stove, and squeeze on it to make sure that there's no leakage and no alcohol on the hose. Okay, I think that's pretty straightforward. Just make sure your nipple cap doesn't leak. Okay, now we'll talk about fueling the stove. I recommend the first time that you fuel up your stove and use it, any of the stoves for that matter, that you do it in low light like I am right here, even lower light. Now, when you first fuel the stove, I recommend that you take your bottle and start squeezing and hold your finger on this very center wick. And it won't immediately start to get wet, but if you hold it there, about right now, you'll feel that start to get wet. As soon as it starts to get wet, I recommend you stop there, and whatever you have for a pot stand, put your pot stand over your stove, light it, then put your pot on. Now in that mode you can see where the alcohol is because there'll be a blue flame. Now if the alcohol isn't completely pumped in the way it should be, you won't see a blue flame all the way to the edge of the wick. You'll see it orange. So let me let this burn down a bit, and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now, once you started to fuel the stove and lit it, if you didn't overfuel it or didn't get it completely full, which is standard procedure, it should look like this. You should see orange. At this point, flip your bottle upside down and start squeezing slowly and watch the flame. And as the alcohol reaches it, which it will here in a moment, you'll see that it'll start going towards the edge. Now, very lightly squeeze it now, not very hard at all. And very lightly, just a little pulse, and go, and pretty soon, you'll see there that you have solid blue. That's fully fueled up. Don't hurry that part or you'll overfuel it. And you'll see there's no flame below the wick. The wick is completely blue, and that is fully fueled. And you want to approach that very slowly with very slowly squeeze the bottle. Now, when this burns for a while, it will get back to that orange mode, and which is approaching simmer mode. It'll do that fairly quickly in 2 or 3 minutes. And then if you want to maintain high, you can just give the bottle another squeeze and bring it back to this mode. Or you can let it go to the lower mode where it's only burning in the very center of the wick, and that would be simmer. Okay, I think that's basically everything for the stove. Now let's talk about boiling water in the pot. Okay, while we're waiting for this to come to a boil, let's talk about some of the other aspects of this. You can have this wick blue all the way to the edge, which would be for a hard boil, or you can let it burn back to 1/4 of an inch in, and that's a medium to a high boil, or you can let it burn all the way back so just the very center wick is burning, and that would be a low boil. I would use, if I was going to cook pasta, just a slow boil, just keep it at like 210, 211, to just keep your pasta cooking. It doesn't need to be a hard boil. Now, if you're going to make coffee, you don't even need to bring it to a boil. You can just bring it up until you hear the pot starting to talk, like you can hear it right now. And that'll be hot enough for coffee, because there's no need to boil it for coffee, because you can't drink boiling coffee, and boiling water into coffee changes the flavor of it a little bit. It's not a good idea. If you want to do something, to cook something with it, there's lots of different things that you can get right off the shelf. Probably the best possible thing would be to put 2 cups of water in this, bring it to a rolling boil, throw in a block of ramen noodles, let it go back to a simmer, and let it simmer for a couple of minutes before you put your spice packet in. That's a fairly easy meal, and it's a fun meal. Most everybody has some ramen noodles around. Okay, now I want to talk about this once it comes to a hard boil. Now I'm going to fuel this back up. It's at simmer right now. And then once it starts to go out to the edge, I'll slow down, then you just give it a little bit more, another little squeeze until I see the orange go away. And that's fully fueled right there. Now once this comes to a boil, I want to show you a couple safety factors about that. Okay, I think you can see we're at a rolling boil right now. The steam is coming up in front of me. Now, I know most people know this, but in case you forget, and I have before, this lid doesn't have a vent in it. So the steam is coming out between the gap in the lid and the pot. That steam is hot, and if you reach right in over it and that steam hits your fingers, it will burn you or scald you. I've done that many times. It's not that much fun. So I usually reach right in over the top and try to stay away from the steam ring around the edge and pick the lid off. And I put it on the same way. If you reach in from the side and try to do it, and you lift the lid and you get a burst of steam out, you can burn your hands. Second off, this pot has 2 cups of boiling water in it, that's a huge amount of energy in one spot. If that were to be tipped over and land in your lap, that's a trip to the emergency room. And we don't want to do that on Christmas Day. So use a pot stand that's appropriate on a flat surface, and once your pot has come to a boil, if you're done using it, take it off of the stand and set it on a flat surface and blow out your stove. That way, there's much less chance of the pot being tipped over and burning somebody, and the stove being blown out. There's no chance of somebody in daylight not seeing the flame and reaching over it and burning themselves. That could be a bad thing. Okay, now, these pots on these pot stands, all of them can be tipped over easily, so be really careful about that. And make sure you've got it on a flat surface, and make sure nobody bumps it, because we don't want to tip this pot over. Second off, if you're using one of the Imusa pots, make sure that the handle is wrapped with carbon felt, or that you have something to put around it before you grab a hold of it, because the handles on the Imusa pots get hot. And if you don't have the carbon felt wrap around it, or using a windscreen to grab a hold of it, or a towel or something, you will burn yourself. And second off, if you are going to use a towel, make sure you keep it out of the flames, because you don't want to catch your towel on fire. That's basically everything you need to know on these wick stoves. And more importantly, I'd like to go over and make sure this lid does not leak. Make sure that you feel the hose and there's no alcohol running down it. That's probably the #1 thing that I would be concerned about. And make sure you take your pot off and put it down where it's flat so it doesn't get tipped over. And try not to overfuel your stove, to when it gets close to the edge, slow down and very lightly put your alcohol in until it just turns blue to the edge. So I'm Tinny from Mini Bowl Design. Get out and hike, take a friend, and enjoy some really great meals on your alcohol stoves. And more important than anything, try to have a really great Christmas and a really great day. Bye-bye.